Hi, fans of high quality entertainment. I am with Joe Mayo, Ken Michaels, Glenn Kellaway in his basement, and Brian Emanuel for the very first time on my channel. He was just telling me he's watched me for years. He's a Facebook friend. And we're here today to talk about the career of John Schneider. I couldn't wait to tell that joke. And it's Sam. Sam, we're here to talk about John Schneider. You probably don't even know who that is, do you?
John Schneider? No, I do not.
Why does he look like it? He looks like an actor that I know.
He is an actor.
Starsky and Hutch.
Starsky and Hutch.
He was
What
Starsky
show
and
he was in the Dukes of Hazzard. Right?
Dukes of Hazzard. Dukes of Hazzard. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But apart from that, lately I've been watching in syndication Dr. Quinn. And he actually was in the show for a while. I'm forgetting the name of the actress. It'll come to me.
Jane Seymour.
Jane Seymour. Thank you, Joe.
This is actually kind of a Beatles connection with the Dukes of Hazzard because Ringo's wife's sister was in the Dukes of Hazzard.
Oh,
right?
yeah, Catherine Bach.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
So there we go.
I don't think they're related, though. I don't think they're
What
related.
a segue. Yeah, they're sisters.
I remember a time when I mean, not to belabor this, but it's funny. I think I remember watching Merv Griffin in 1981, and the audience said, "Are you any relation to Catherine Bach?" And I remember her saying, "I think it was Catherine Bach," and Barbara Bach said, "No, but I get her fan mail and she gets mine."
I thought.
Okay.
And then Ringo laughed and said, "That's 2 letters each."
I remember Ringo being on the Phil Donahue show. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Phil Donahue.
Phil Donahue.
That was Phil
And
Donahue,
he'd
not Merv Griffin.
go right up to Ringo. It'd be so uncomfortable, right? Like right up to his face to talk.
Yeah, that's what he does. Yeah, that's what it was, folks. Merv Griffin, March '81. Yeah, that's what that is.
So
Phil Donahue. Phil Donahue, March. Phil Donahue, March 1981. I got it.
Phil, I always get those mixed up.
Yeah.
I was in the audience for the Phil Donahue show.
In 95.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about, you said 81. Okay.
Yeah, the 81 one was that one that I was referencing. The one I know these stupid trivial things. But I remember Ken Michaels there giving on Phil Donahue in 95, and in the audience, and you saying how much you like Time Takes Time.
That's right.
Really?
And I got a few cheers in the audience when I said that.
Yeah, good. I'm so glad that Ringo heard that too. You know?
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So we're here to talk about the Beatles, and not that we have to totally focus on it, but I finally broke down and I bought the Blu-ray of Get Back. I don't know about any of you, but when I first heard that there was no bonus material or anything, I was like, I'm not buying it, you know. But just recently, I thought it over. It's maybe not going to always be on Disney,
right?
And you know, you might not be able to always buy this. You know, I started getting paranoid, so it's like I'm going to buy it, and I am glad I bought it. You know, and the other thing is, I know a lot of us want more and more and more and more, but the way I look at it now, we're lucky to have all of this.
We sure are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So.
And ironically, it was because of COVID that this whole thing became as long as it did.
Yeah.
Because Peter Jackson had extra time on his hands.
Yeah.
And, you know, he did ask Apple, would you mind if it ran longer and longer? And they didn't seem to bother them.
Yeah.
So that's the only benefit we got out of COVID.
Yeah, it's the only one I can think of.
Yeah.
People are coming together like this a lot more.
That's true. That's true. Yes.
The only negative about is not including the footage of them performing The Two of Us, and that was in the Let It Be movie. I wish they'd at least included that.
Well, I agree with you, Glenn, but then sometimes I think to myself, searching for that silver lining, I say, whenever we get Let It Be, at some point, hopefully we will, at least that's one thing kind of unique to that that makes that stand out a little.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true.
I read somewhere, I don't know how true it is, that Peter Jackson was pushing either Disney or Apple maybe to release an extended edition with all the stuff that didn't make it on.
Mhm.
I don't know how true that is, but I would love to see that.
Yeah. Well, Peter Jackson wants to do it, but it's a matter of whether Disney's going to deem it, feasible.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Well,
If
who
there's enough of
knows?
an audience.
Who knows about the contract that Apple has with Disney and how long they'll have the rights for this, and if that might change once the contract runs out. So,
Yeah.
but it was a miracle that we got something this long. It really
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And it's miraculous that it was filmed in the first place.
Yeah.
Imagine if every album that the Beatles made
Oh,
was hours and hours
Oh.
of footage.
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
I wish.
Yeah.
And because of the technology they developed, we now get more audio product. We can
Yeah.
go back in the catalog and they can separate the tracks, and so we're gonna.
That's actually right. The technology they used for Get Back is what Paul actually uses on tour now when he sings "I've Got a Feeling" and he has John come on the screen.
Yep.
Somebody I know, Paulina Angel, she made an audio clip. I don't know if you heard it, of "Free as a Bird." That is amazing,
Wow.
with John's voice right there.
Really?
Wow.
Not like sounding distant anymore or
Yeah.
underneath water or whatever. And if she can do it, it
Yeah.
can be done. Whether they're going to do that, whether they would undertake something like that, I don't know. But it certainly would be nice to hear, because it really sounds even better than the "Free as a Bird" we have.
Well, that kind of
Right.
leads us to maybe doing something with the anthology series, creating a Blu-ray version of that, and maybe enhancing those songs that were
Oh
included.
yeah.
Well, hey, that's a good point, Glenn, because people keep saying, "Oh, when are they going to put this on Blu-ray? When are they going to upgrade the anthology?" Now, if they did, they could add that as
Mhm.
well. The two songs really could go, really extra clarity or whatever they want to call it, newly mastered, really great
Mhm.
shape. Because it's quite a revelation hearing what she did.
Yeah.
When we first heard about this new audio technology that Peter Jackson was doing with his team, my mind started to race as to what the possibilities could be from this. I mean, you could take mono recordings that only exist in mono and make real stereo versions,
Mhm.
like the Decca audition, for example. And I know that there's a bootleg out there with a homemade of some kind stereo version, but it could be probably even more professional with today's modern technology. And not just what Peter Jackson's team has come up with. There are other ones that are out there that I've heard about, but you got to know how to manipulate it and how it all works. But just think about that. When I was at the Fest for Beatle fans last year, we actually did a Zoom talk with Peter Jackson, and Michael Lindsay Hogg also was there too, on screen. And I was saying, can you imagine you could take the Star Club tapes? What you could do with
Yeah.
that if you could work with the balance of that.
Mhm.
And of course, you got to get Apple to agree to all this, but it's endless what you can do.
Mhm.
Well,
You
that's
could
the thing.
also.
Go
Oh, I'm
ahead,
sorry. Go
Brad.
ahead. I was gonna say you could also take some of the live stuff, maybe like Shea Stadium or something, and clean it up, get rid of some of the crowd noise, and
Yep.
have that a lot more clear as well.
Well, yeah, kind of with that, just when we finally get to hopefully a Please Please Me set, those bonus features are not, I mean, there's obviously not a lot of studio extras from those sessions, but what they can do with, pre those sessions, even like just the live versions of those songs that they were playing in the Cavern Club as the bonus cuts. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for them attaching that to the old kind of gritty, grainy audio that's out there.
Sam, one of the things I always wonder a lot of times when fans like us are talking about this, and people often say, "Oh, there's not many sessions from With the Beatles or Please Please Me," and whatever it may be. And I keep thinking, maybe I'm wrong about this, but we're reacting to the stuff that got leaked out that we've heard, on superior sounding bootlegs and things. But is it possible that there's a lot of stuff in there still that we haven't heard that hasn't been heard? People say that about a lot of things. The Ringo album, even I've heard people say, well, there's not a lot of extra stuff on there. Not a lot of outtakes and stuff. Do you mean so far what's surfaced? Or
true.
is there more stuff in the vaults? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting just because of, the brief amount of time that Please Please Me took to record. Like,
Right.
just to use any kind of rationale, you would think they didn't. They went in there with their songs.
That's
they were
true.
tight. They went in. They didn't have any money. They had to record them when they could. So
Yeah.
it's very. It would be very interesting to know if there were any kind of, false starts or anything like that we don't know about.
Mhm.
But we do know from all of Mark Lewison's work, the recording sessions, how many
Right.
takes were done of every song.
Mm.
How many
Yes.
of them were full takes? How many were breakdowns? Off the top of my head, I don't know. But we do have that kind of information available.
And a lot of them aren't out there. I think, for example, a couple of years ago, the White Album box set that came out, some of the extra songs, it would say, just for example, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, take 25. Well,
Yeah.
where are the other 24 takes?
Right.
Well, then it kind of goes in line because for those of you that don't know me, I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, like Glenn is, and one of the things that his camp did for the cutting edge sessions, the 1966 electric sessions that covered. Really it was the 65, 66 sessions.
Right, I know that one. Yeah.
There was a mega set that was put out with literally every single note, not the 8-disc like the Ultra set. It was like the mega set. And the Dylan camp after that kind of said, we're not. That's probably the last time that we'll ever do that because the interest is just not there to have 100 different takes of Like a Rolling Stone. And so you kind of have to think, even though we might know these different sessions for Please Please Me, just to keep using that album as an example, do we really want
I don't.
those?
I don't know about you guys, but I don't need to hear 100 takes of Please Please Me.
I have mixed feelings on that. I wonder about that sometimes myself. Part of me does, part of me doesn't. I know that when I was listening to all the BBC recordings, they have like box sets of all the and different shows have you have like 10 versions of Love Me Do or 15 versions of She Loves You or whatever it might be. And after a while, I guess I would like a good sampling though, if possible. I'd like to have like Misery, that the way you hear those different 6 takes or something of Misery, or the evolution of I Saw Her Standing There. Well, I say evolution in this case, it's talking about trying to get a good take, and the breakdowns and Paul getting frustrated at one take, and then they say, okay, take whatever, take 9, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the one they used. They clipped that at the start. Because that's where it came from, because he was getting so annoyed.
Some of the takes on the White Album, like the Hey Jude, I forget, take 7 or something. I love it as much as the single, like the way Paul's singing, and I love the White Album, outtakes and demos and everything. That's my favorite of the box sets.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm on both sides of the fence on this, where it comes to wanting every take out there, because I feel that because the Beatles are who they are and they're the most important band there ever was, we should have everything out there. But we don't think like the Beatles would or Apple would. They're very sensitive, I think, to their own material, as they should be. And who are we to judge them? They just to put out the best outtakes. I think I'm all for that, and I'd love, as Joe said, the evolution of a song. That's where something like the Beatles anthology did fairly well, to see the different takes of Strawberry Fields, how that developed from take 1 to take 7, and then editing 7 and 26 together. That kind of thing I find really fascinating. But, I would probably listen to every take of every song, but I wouldn't listen in repetition.
No,
right.
No. That stuff fascinates me on anthology. That's my sweet spot. Listening to 8 days a week, how that went. I'll Be Back.
Yep.
How they're doing that like a waltz. That stuff gets me crazy. That's the stuff I want.
When you hear something, I just wanted to say there are certain songs where it's not fully developed, like "And I Love Her" on the Beatles anthology didn't have the middle 8. A Love Like Ours, that part. Or I'm Looking Through You, the early take of that, which didn't have the middle 8 there. Just to hear songs in the early stages that aren't finished, knowing how it would sound when it is finished, but to hear it, the development of a song is really fascinating, especially when there's a radical difference.
Right. It's almost like on Anthology 2, the version they have of Yes It Is, it starts off as just an acoustic version of John singing, and they just blend it into the final released version.
Yeah.
Or even Yellow Submarine off the
Yes.
when you hear John do the demo, it's just like, wow, that's a whole different
yeah.
song. It's a
Right.
whole
I
different
mean,
meaning.
I could name that stuff forever. I mean, It's Only Love. You've got to hide your love away. I'm down. All those versions they gave. That's the stuff I like. I mean, I'm not as big on live as everybody.
No,
With
no.
me with live, I rather see it too. You know, I rather
Yeah.
see it like the performance as well as hear it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Hmm. I'll tell you one recording that really blows me away is that instrumental version of "Everybody's Got Something to Hide" from the
Oh
White
yeah.
Album, which I
Yeah.
never heard before. I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. When you hear something that you were never aware that it existed before, you know, that's where a lot of these box sets excel.
hmm
Well, that was like the big hype with the Abbey Road set was, we had this one has the long one on it, in its
Yeah.
entirety. And, that was the big thing released on, I think it was released on YouTube as a single prior to the box set. And for me, that just blew my mind. Because, I knew it, obviously, and I knew, the Her Majesty bit thrown in the middle and all of that. But to hear it strewn together, even though it wasn't fully realized yet with those takes that they put together for the long one, it's
Right.
still, you had that taste of like, what if they had done that second side and finished it like that? So it's the need is out there. It's just the issue of that's when Apple and Disney and the Beatles have to step in and say, is this a moneymaker? Can we make money off of putting out these other 100 takes of these songs that haven't been reissued yet? So
I feel like it's one of those things where, as fans, you want to hear it, but you won't listen to it all the time. It's just as a collector, it's something you want to have in your collection.
That's like a historical
just to have it.
you want to have on the
Right.
shelf. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right.
And a lot of the stuff, I gotta admit, as much as I love it when it comes out and I tear it open and I do a video on it and a review or whatever and shows, I haven't listened to
Yeah.
Pepper since 2017 or the White Album or any of these things. I'm trying to remember now what the extras were, believe it or not.
Yeah. And who knows what the Beatles would have individually of stuff they were working on at home. Like Paul's writing a song, and is he recording it into a reel-to-reel tape recorder?
Right.
Do you still have all these old historical documents of him, first working on Yesterday or something before he took it into the studio? Or do they have this kind of material that's available too? I don't know.
Right. Have you all heard that wonderful ruined demo of "We Can Work It Out" that John recorded over? That was on the Lost Lennon tapes. That's where it
No.
started.
Yes. Yes.
You can find it on YouTube. You got to hear it. It's great. You hear Paul doing "We Can Work It Out." I think he gave the tape to John as a demo, and then about 40 seconds into 45 seconds into it, it goes, whoop, John's like recorded some comedy over it. Just, just to use it as like a spare blank or something. To him, it was just, a tape,
yeah.
Wow, that's funny.
laying around.
I think, talking about like extras and what's left in the vault, I think the one thing every Beatle fan is waiting for is still to hear Carnival of Light.
I'm afraid to hear that. I might be the only one that says, well, not the only one, but one of the few that say, I don't care if it doesn't get released, because everybody, well, who's everybody? I think Mark Lewison heard it. A couple of people heard it, and they say you don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I can imagine it's. Yeah, you'd want to hear it.
They'll release it just so everybody can bash it.
Yeah, I guess it should be out there, right?
Yeah.
But then again, the Beatles are very picky. Paul always was, and I've heard him say in interviews, about so-called bum takes and things like that. I don't think that he really wants everything out there necessarily. I don't know. Doesn't he feel? Is he somebody that wants Carnival of Light out there to prove that he was avant-garde as much as John? Or I guess it would be out if he wanted it out. No.
Well, you need all four parties to approve that.
Right. And I heard supposedly he. I'm sorry.
No, he has said in interviews that he wants it out, just like he's also said that he wants to finish Now and Then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard he tried to get it released on Anthology too, but George vetoed it.
Yeah, George said no.
Oh, okay, that's it.
at the
Just like George
time,
said, I don't want to go on the roof.
He said he didn't call it avant-garde. He called it avant-garde a clue.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Right, that
George didn't
sounds
like
familiar.
the fact at the time that demo had a loud buzz through it, which now can easily
Yeah.
be removed.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure if he didn't like the song, period.
Huh.
But he might have felt, we did 2 songs already. That's enough.
Well, I thought
Right.
George liked electronic sounds. I don't know. That's funny.
Yeah.
He's got the whole album. Yeah.
Which kind of makes it, again, with all this being said, to loop it back around and get back, that kind of goes with the whole, what else was filmed? What would be quality to see from those tapes? I mean, I know obviously there was some superimposing of audio over some of the, the video. What are we missing by, not seeing what was out there? I mean, I'm sure it's great, and I would love to see it, but again, they have to think about the common man out there, what they're going to want to see.
Do we know
Personally,
how
as
many
much as I
total
love,
hours-
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Glenn.
Do we know how many total hours there were that Peter Jackson was working with?
You said 50-something hours.
No, I think what was it altogether? Oh, he's talking about the audio, that there's over 100 hours. Didn't he
Wow.
say that?
Yeah.
That sounds familiar.
In various interviews, it seems like the numbers increased as time went on as to what existed. So, but like I said, I think that Apple would be very sensitive as to what goes out, but I don't see the harm in releasing everything the Beatles ever did and all the video that's out there, but doing it in limited quantity, so there isn't that much money being spent on it. What if everything was a limited edition? What if they put out everything that they recorded in the studio, but they only made 5,000 copies? You don't think that's going to sell?
Of course.
And then, of course, copies would be made from that.
Right.
But I don't think there would be a loss there. But again, we're not them. And you also have to realize that Olivia is acting in George's behalf. What would George approve? Yoko is acting on, and Sean now, on John's behalf, and what would he approve? And I know George was very sensitive about
Yeah.
things going out.
Yeah.
You didn't want to let it be out either. I don't think.
And I imagine when Sean kind of takes over being the guy in charge of what goes on with the Lennon estate, he might he's probably a bit more open to what is going to come out than Yoko would be. That's not as sensitive. That's what I'm thinking anyway.
I don't know. Yoko's been very generous, I
Yeah.
think, through the years. I mean, just the fact that we had the Lost Lennon Tapes radio series.
There she is.
And the 2 box sets for Plastic Ono Band and Imagine.
Mhm.
Like, how much more
Excellent.
can you possibly give?
I wonder how much more there is even.
Yeah.
Well, they can give us sometime in New York.
Well,
Oh,
we're
I'm
still
wondering.
wondering.
In that regard, I don't know enough. I don't want to go there too much, but I know. I mean, about Sean, I don't really know how he feels about that kind of thing. But I'm wondering if he'd be more open to like taking a chance. Like if that's what you mean, Glenn. Like maybe putting that out and seeing what happens. Even if it's a little sensitive.
Yeah.
Well, we know just recently the Harrison camp is just recently, turning over some product with Dark Horse, just giving us all of those digital files. So who knows what's going to come in the next 5 years?
Oh, let's hope they do some stuff and put out the 74 tour, a good presentation of that. Maybe the best things they can find.
Well,
Of this-
Bangladesh.
Bangladesh. There was an article. There was an article in Rolling Stone before COVID hit, where Olivia and Danny were talking about that and saying that they had plans of putting out archival releases for everything through Dark Horse, including something from the 74 tour. They didn't mention Extra Texture. I don't know why, but
No comment.
but they did say that, so I think there are plans in the works, but I think COVID delayed so many things.
That was a very delicious piece of news, and Danny's quote about the deep dive into the archives. I like that. It sounds very delicious.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, there's always some mystery. After Early Takes Volume 1 came out, we were all waiting for Volume 2,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
nothing happened.
Yeah.
And there was even an interview that Giles Martin gave where he said that he was working on Volume 2,
Really.
and still
Volume 1
nothing
was
happened.
excellent. I love
Oh, it's great.
Oh yeah, that's great.
There's nothing like the sound of George on acoustic guitar. He's
Yeah.
just so much
Yeah.
at home
Oh,
on an
I
acoustic.
remember with that All Things Must Pass, hearing Cosmic Empire was just it just blew
Yes.
my mind, and that quality,
Yeah.
just so
No.
good.
And I've heard that Peter Jackson, there's rumors he's been working on something Beatles related. I found out today what it is.
He's gonna make it into a
He's
good
gonna
movie.
remaster it. and-
Yeah.
I've
Another
never
joke.
seen that all the way through. I used to be on
I've
HBO
had
when I
it
was.
for like a year. I still haven't watched it all.
I've never seen the whole thing. I've seen bits and pieces of it,
Yeah.
but I've never watched the whole thing.
I have to admit, I went to the drive-in to see it.
Hey, I want to give my regards to Broad Street Blu-ray. I want and a set, and I don't love the movie. I don't love the movie, but I like the music and performances, and I would think it should be. I'd like to see it out, with extras and things.
Yeah. Even
All the
McCartney,
different-
is McCartney not working on like the Wings Over America tours? He wasn't. There's a lot of other tour dates and everything. Like wasn't there a European tour as well or something? There's a lot. He's got a lot of live stuff. So.
Oh yeah. I don't know if he's ever going to do anything beyond the 75-76 World Tour other than what's out. He hasn't talked about it. He did talk about putting out sound check material. He mentioned that a few years ago.
That's an album I would love at this point in Paul's career if he could do some kind of a package of the best sound check material, including songs that he doesn't do live. Like I always say, I got to see one sound check, and when I went there, like one song that stood out in my mind was he did the song "Alligator" off New, and there could be all kinds of songs that you don't usually hear him do, and he would be in good voice, and this could be material going back to '89. Sound checks or with Wings as well. But I mean, from '89 up, I mean, there could be a lot of good stuff there for a release.
Well, I've always said it would be cool to just if he took kind of like where U2 are going right now with their new album that's coming out, where they're reimagining all their songs. If it was just McCartney now as an 80-plus-year-old man with a stripped down version of his band doing his hits like acoustic, like in his house, his home studio, like to hear like an acoustic Sea Moon or something like that in his current voice. I mean, he doesn't have to be writing new material for us. He's kind of, he did that, where he put out Kisses on the Bottom. A lot of these guys, as they get older, will put out their covers albums. But, if he reimagined some of his tracks, just a stripped back format, I would be all for it. But I mean, I don't know how well it would go over with the masses.
Right.
I don't think that would go over well. You think about Give My Regards to Broad Street, and there are a lot of people who said, why redo these Beatles songs? You can't improve on the Beatles
Including
recordings
Ringo.
of these songs.
Yeah. But I think Ringo, besides that, I think he's self-conscious about his drumming, or was. I don't think maybe he was. And I think even, again, I remember these things. I have so many interviews back there on tape, And Paul, I remember him saying at one point, I thought maybe he was concerned he wouldn't do it as well. He said one time in some interview. And I think that was part of it. I mean, why? I mean, he figured, according to Paul, I've done my Hey Jude performance, where I'm great on it and everything, and I maybe didn't want to risk not doing it as well. And I could understand that if that's the case.
If you notice in Broad Street, when Ringo drums, even when it comes to the medley, Yesterday, Here, There, and Everywhere, he doesn't drum until Wanderlust.
No, he's looking for his drums. He's looking for his brushes. I like that scene. I like that whole bit there. I love that medley, and I love the way it's a somber thing, And you got to have that. They got to put that moment where, in the middle of Yesterday, you have the guy in the control room going, "Very bloody appropriate." In the middle of the song, it's very depressing the way it's. But
I haven't seen that movie for years.
Hey, 40 years next year.
Wow.
Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible.
It is.
Yeah.
If you just watch it as music videos for each song,
Yeah, that's what
it's
I do.
really great.
Yeah.
And
And
go to
I
the bathroom doing the Eleanor's Dream sequence. At least.
no, I love that. That's very Charles Dickensian.
Oh man.
I'm sure that's what Paul was going for.
Yeah, it was.
I might eat a lot of Mexican food and stuff at the beginning of the movie just to get ready for that part.
Before we go any further, I should have you all introduce your channels and everything before I totally forget.
Oh.
So, Joe Mayo, tell us about your channels.
Yeah, my channel is called Mean Mr. Mayo. Instead of mustard, it's mayo. So Mean Mr. Mayo. And I'm doing well, nobody's going to see this for a while, right? This video, but I'm having a video premiere today. You can go back and watch it on the marginalizing of John Lennon. It's not as bad as it sounds. It's a good discussion.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then you're also involved with
the
another-
movies. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's what you're referring to. I have a movie
any
channel
that you're involved in.
I'm trying to work on my movie channel and TV. It's movie and TV. It's called Movies with Mayo. So it's either movies with me or movies with Mayo. I had a lot of titles. It's a running gag. I had but the last one I thought was going to stick was Dial M for Mayo, which I thought I thought I was going to stick with that, and then I didn't.
Starring Rick Moran.
That's a good title. That's a good title.
Well, yeah, I used that, and after a long time, that's the one I was going to stick with.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I don't like it because movies is not in it. I just want casual people who may not know it's Dial M for murder.
Yeah.
They might not know. So I wanted movies in the title.
And Ken, you've got your YouTube channel, and then you've got your radio show. So tell us about that.
There's a lot to talk about. The radio show, actually, this month, I'm celebrating my 41st anniversary since I started doing it.
Wow.
On college radio.
Nice.
It started at New York Tech, the New York Institute of Technology on Long Island. And a friend of mine suggested that I do a Beatles show. I didn't plan on doing one, but, I started doing one in March of '82, and it took off. I did it for a year and a half before the show went to a rock station in New Jersey, WDHA, which Joe used to listen to. And then after that, it was on an oldie station on Long Island, B103. I was also on XM radio. This is before the merger with Sirius. I was on for 6 years on 2 different channels with this long form Beatles show called Every Little Thing. Actually, it didn't become Every Little Thing until I was on XM radio. I was always searching for a good title for the show, and Every Little Thing really works. But just to give you a real brief description of the show, because the show really encompasses everything you could put into a Beatles show. Group music, solo music, songs they wrote, performed, or played on for other people, cover versions of their songs, novelty records about them, tribute songs, Apple recording artists, you name it. It's all thrown into the mix. And I have interesting thematic sets that I do every single week. I have trivia that I put into my show, all these games that I developed over the last 41 years, which I'm now incorporating into my YouTube channel, by the way. It's on over 50 radio stations, Every Little Thing, a syndicated version.
Wow.
And you can find a list of all those stations on my website, which is kenmichaelsradio.com. It lists all the stations, the broadcast times, and links to each station so you can stream them. But there is one radio station in New Jersey, WFDU, that makes the show available on demand. You have to go to wfdu.fm, look up their archival shows, type in Every Little Thing, and they put each of my shows on their website available for 2 weeks. After the show airs on Sunday mornings, each show is available for 2 weeks. So you have 2 shows to pick from. As each show airs on the FM station, then they put it on the website. So that's been, my greatest pride of all, because I've been sticking with it for 41 years.
Yeah.
And In addition to that, I have 2 talk show podcasts on the Beatles. There's Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast, which I do with Joe Mayo and Kid O'Toole and Tom Hunyadi. And that's strictly on the solo Beatles, although when Beatle box sets come out, we have to talk about those. And then there's the other show that I've been at since 2011, 2012. Yeah, 2012. Things We Said Today, which is anything you want to talk about the Beatles, the group years, the solo years. I started doing the show as a news program with Steve Marinucci, who is like, no one has ever done more for Beatle news on the internet than Steve. He had his Abbey Road Beatles website, Beatles Examiner. He posted stuff every single day for a long time. And then we expanded the show into having different co-hosts over the years. And we have Alan Kozin as a co-host who's been on the show now for a long time. He used to work for the New York Times in their classical department. And he's one of the co-authors of the new McCartney Legacy book with Adrian Sinclair.
Thank
you, Larry. Yes.
There we go.
And that's a marvelous book. Everybody's been talking about it.
Excellent.
And Darren DeVivo is my co-host also on that show. He's been on WFDU in New York for 39 years now, was his anniversary just now. And then I have my own YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio, which is all conversations on the Beatles with anybody I feel like talking to. Authors, podcast hosts, you guys can come on. Joe's been on several times.
Hey, Ken, have you ever tried to get Joe English?
A long time ago I tried, but he's very hard to reach. And from what I understand, he's like part of a religious cult, if you will. And he's turned his back on his rock and roll, life. And I've interviewed many members of Wings. The only ones I didn't interview are Paul and Linda and Jimmy McCulloch and Joe English. But all the other ones, I've interviewed. Oh, not Jeff Britton yet, but all the other ones I've interviewed. That's a great experience too. So my YouTube channel is Ken Michaels Radio. Lots of conversations. Some of them are one-on-one. Some are panel discussions. I just did my second Beatles trivia show, and Joe was on it.
I saw that.
And he's the undefeated king so far.
Well, I didn't want to give anything away, but I got to keep coming back if I keep winning. So I might have to. I might have to throw a game.
He's going to be the Ken Jennings of our show. So I got all that. And my website, kenmichaelsradio.com, which has Beatles trivia every week, and you can win prizes every week too. So that keeps me busy.
Yeah.
Cool.
A lot of stuff.
And I just want to quickly mention another book, this one, Paul McCartney, Music is Ideas. I'm going to be interviewing the author tomorrow at some point. I've only read like 5% of this, but I really love this. Like, I know, it's going to take me a while to read it all. But
I'm going to be ordering that soon.
What's that?
What's the author's name? Give him a plug.
It is Luca Parassi.
Yep. I just did a real quick interview on my YouTube channel with him. It's like a sneak preview of the book. Yeah. I should be having it probably tomorrow in the mail. So
cool.
Speaking of interviews, Larry, I want to say that was fantastic. Great interview you had with Mark Forner the other day.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really nice to talk to him after all these years. And then Arthur Brown, I don't know if you saw Arthur Brown dropped in one of our live chats, and I knew he was coming on, but Glenn Kelloway, who was a big fan of him, didn't know. And Arthur Brown! Sam, it's you that is next. Tell us about your channel.
Well, it's just my it's just my name that you see below, so it's nothing too difficult to remember. Sam St. John. I've been doing YouTube for a little over 2 years now. in terms of, putting up videos, vlogging, as we all kind of do. I will play guitar every now and then. I'll go live and just, play without any kind of, topic or anything. But I usually will talk about Americana is where my specialties kind of fall. I love Bob Dylan, John Prine, Van Morrison, Tom Petty. Obviously love the Beatles, but I'll leave that to kind of the big guns to take care of the Beatles conversations. But yeah, it's been really, really great meeting guys like Glenn and Larry and now Joe as well. I've been on his channel once or twice. So yeah, just, Sam St. John, if you like any of those artists, I'll talk about them. I do concert reviews. I go to a lot of concerts, and currently have a series. It's sporadic where I'm talking about albums that kind of shape my musical foundation. And I just recently did Abbey Road not too long ago, was the first real Beatles album that I listened to. But I also did an episode on the Beatles One album, which was my first Beatles compilation that I had as a little kid. So they're all on my channel, and I hope everybody comes over and subscribes to it.
And you forgot about the Cosmic Torpedoes, Stan.
Right, Glenn and I are we're in a little duo. Whenever Glenn drives down the East Coast, he's in Canada, I'm in Virginia, and Glenn will stop by and we'll play some tunes and put them up. But we're currently on hiatus until Glenn decides he wants to see me again. So
yeah, this year sometime.
Yeah.
Brian, tell us about your YouTube channel that doesn't exist.
So I don't have a YouTube channel that exists, but I do have a Facebook page. I have a podcast. It's called Return of the Mac. It's not really about one specific topic. We talk about anything: music, movies, sports, anything, just entertainment pretty much. We've had celebrity guest interviews on there.
You haven't had me on, Brian.
Not yet. It's coming. All you guys are welcome on, by the way.
Oh, that's nice.
We have an Instagram page, rotm.tv. Sometimes we'll go to a live event, whether it be a concert or a sporting event, just something with a lot of people. We'll interview fans, talk to them. And that's pretty much it. We've been doing it since 2016. And it's a lot of fun. It's called Return of the Mac, facebook.com/ROTM.
Yeah. If you can all send me links afterwards, I can get most of them, but, and then I'll put it below the video, everybody's links for everything, except for Glenn Kellaway from the basement.
No,
I'm not going to bother with him at all.
Don't do that.
You can tell us about your channel.
I can?
Yeah.
Okay, Glenn Kellaway from the basement, because I'm in my basement, which is where my stereo is and my record collection. And I do videos probably every other day and just kind of share stories and share the music that I love. Very eclectic taste. I can go anywhere from the Beatles to bluegrass and jazz and all kinds of stuff. So it's a varied conversation. And yeah, come on along and join in.
Cool. I did want to say one more thing, at least, about Get Back, because when I bought this, it was my third time watching it. And you know how certain things were left off, like them doing Let It Be in the Long and Winding Road. I wish instead they would have taken stuff out. Like there's one part in, I think it's part 2, where Paul's reading from the newspaper for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
And
That's what I don't like that part too
It
much.
didn't really bother me before, but I guess it's the third time. I was like, oh my God, shut up. Like,
Larry, I'm glad you kind of mentioned it. I was going to go into this. I mean, look, while I'm a fan and I like seeing everything, every little thing, I think being objective about it, it's kind of bloated. I mean, it's very bloated. But I mean, for the casual fans and stuff, I don't know. I think they could really make a really amazing 3-hour, 2.5, 3-hour piece on this. Maybe it could have done good theatrically, and maybe as a really tight 2.5-hour piece.
Yeah,
maybe, or 45 minutes, 2 hours 45, maybe.
Because they did have a preview, correct, for like the family and
yeah.
It was like
I don't know how
2
long
hours.
that. I think that was about 2.5 hours. I think.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you could do a real. I mean, yeah, it's great to see, but I get so frustrated because I want to hear more of the songs. You know, some of
Mhm.
them, this is cut a
Yeah,
lot.
they would cut them. Yeah, they're
You know,
playing, sounding great, and they
it's frustrating.
yeah.
And I got to tell you, well, the first time because I've seen this about 4 times or so, I guess, in its entirety. When I first was watching the Rooftop the first time, I didn't appreciate all the changes to the street. I mean, the camera, different images at once. I guess you could
Mhm.
say. You know, I didn't like that. And the second time, I started appreciating it from a cinematic point. You're trying to tell a story, is really what you're trying to do. But of course, there are places I'm just going to say where you can get the whole thing and the whole performance
Yeah.
without any cutaway from. It's all the group, the whole thing. But it'd be nice for them to put something like that out regularly, officially, so everybody could
Yes.
see it. You know.
I tell you, the most difficult thing that I ever have to do in all the interviews that I've recorded is to edit. And when you've watched this thing for 8 hours, I don't know, I would have such a difficult time trying to decide what do you take out.
Yeah.
Because there's so much of it that I find really fascinating. It's one thing if if the first thing you've watched is a 2.5 hour version, and you could settle on that. But once you've seen everything, and I understand what you're saying. I mean, this is not really for the casual fan, 8 hours of
Mhm.
watching the
Yeah.
Beatles. But for people that really are into them, who are fascinated with more than just the music,
Mhm.
this is such a great character study of the four
Hmm.
of them and how they responded and how that month progressed. And just seeing the different personalities and seeing how Paul, especially in the very beginning, uh, at Twickenham, was really nervous and didn't know if they could pull all this off. And it wasn't until they moved to Apple when John sort of took charge
Yeah.
and Paul kind of felt like the load was lightened for him. That they were. You saw kind of. I don't want to say two different bands, but by the time they went to Apple, it was a bit more relaxed. They were getting things done. They were really having fun. They were enjoying George's songs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They were
Yeah.
having a
Yeah.
blast doing Old Brown Shoe.
Oh, I
that's
love
a great
that.
that's a
You know,
great moment. I
Yeah,
like
I
that.
love
you
that.
know, but it's just so fascinating to see a tense moment here and there at Twickenham. I know usually in the podcast shows when I've talked about this, one of the most fascinating moments is right before George quits. And I think it's the day when it's Elvis Presley's birthday and they're mentioning it.
Yeah,
And
Mhm.
John and Paul are performing something right facing each other,
Yeah.
just a few feet apart.
And a
And
close up of George, and you look so hurt. Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's like,
it could not even be anything to do with John and Paul, right? It could be his marriage. We don't know, right?
well, and
yeah,
I think that's part of the editing too. I mean, Peter Jackson did a fantastic job. I'm not going to take
yeah,
anything away from Peter Jackson. However, he did kind of edit to make it look like there's a reason why George had to leave. The cuts of his face and the cuts of
Yeah.
John and Paul together. I heard. I mean, is it true that there was an off-camera argument just before that between John and George? Some people have said is maybe what was really seething him that moment or something. I don't know, but I think that end is constructed in such a way to make it. I got to give a reason for George's getting up and leaving,
Mhm.
and the way it comes across in the documentary is as if George is like a non-entity and almost,
Yeah.
and it's all John and Paul.
Yeah, but wasn't
well,
George upset about like personal marriage? He had some marriage issues going on at the same
Yeah,
time, right? So I'm sure it's a combination, everything coming down on you, right?
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
Peter Jackson.
Plus I think Ringo farting that
Yeah, that,
You see, that's I
yeah,
wonder. I mean,
yeah.
Was
it's
that
amazing that would stay in. It's funny. It is a funny. It is a funny
that
moment,
was the
but
highlight for Ringo in the documentary.
George had the hardest role in the Beatles. I mean, he was the guy like that really. I mean, John and Paul were just such big characters and the main
yeah,
writers,
Yeah.
and Ringo was just kind of he just, hey, I'm Ringo, I'll do whatever you want, I'm having
Well,
fun. And George had, he couldn't get anything. He just couldn't rise up.
Yeah.
what I found was watching that was just how much cooler Ringo became to me after watching that, because he just let them go with their creativity, and when he needed to come in, he would come in. I mean, obviously at that point he was starting to get into film with Peter Sellers, and I know his alcoholism was kind of kicking in a little bit. So I mean, there's a couple of scenes where he talks about, you know, how he's feeling the next morning, and
Yeah, I like that.
it's funny, but he still comes across as cool, level-headed, and you know, everybody's friend, kind of.
Yeah,
So.
and that wonderful moment when Linda says, "I really like Ringo" or something. I feel really relaxed around him. You know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after the concert on the roof, when they're down in
that's
studio when they're playing it, it's like, that was so interesting. How much they really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
you know, like they
Yeah.
want to do it again. Who was it that said, "Let's do this again"? You know, but Ringo and Linda were holding hands.
Yeah, he's playing
know?
it with his hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
like some of the
Maureen,
parts.
Maureen really likes to rock.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I like how they go back and do some of their older songs, just messing around. You see them do "Help." I think they do "Love Me Do." It's just kind of fun to see things like that.
And I even like that little bit when maybe they're discussing content for the show that we're going to do in Twickenham or something. And George says, "Well, how about this one?" And
Every little thing.
Yeah, he plays every little thing. I just love that. You know.
Well, it's cool to hear them sing songs that they weren't singing lead on too originally.
Right.
And John helping George a little bit with the lyric of "All Things Must Pass."
Yeah.
He says, "You should put my mind can blow a cloud away, not you know."
George helping Ringo with Octopus's Garden.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, it's you know, I don't know if this is the place to say this, but I might as well. You know, you have Let It Be, and I firmly believe that the Beatles were breaking up, and they had broken up, right? So I think Michael Lindsay Hogg wanted to tell the story of the breakup, because he chose, I believe it, I think he denies it, but in my opinion, it looks like he's selecting negative stuff to make it look like why they're falling apart. And the thing is called "Let It Be." You know, let it be.
Yeah.
But what really is a telling scene, and I'm going to try to say this quick, is in "Let It Be." There's this scene, if you remember, where the way it's shown in there, you just see the back of Paul's head and John listening to him, and he's like falling asleep, he's getting bored, and like Paul's going yada 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 yada, and John's like yeah whatever, he's smoking, and now you see the footage in the Jackson thing, and not only it's everybody's there. It's not just John and Paul.
John is totally awake,
into it,
like he's listening, he's talking,
and he's encouraging Paul. Let's just do them. Let's do what we have. And you would never know that in that scene, or initially, John was gung ho about it, and Paul was a little reserved. I think he was like that. He even says like I think I've got a little stage fright. What does he say earlier in the movie? He's saying in Twickenham, I think he says, I feel a little, I think stage fright or something, a little nervous or something like that. And he, you know, you never think Paul would be the one at times to be unsure. He seems like he's not too confident in wanting to do this. And then he comes around.
Well, he has said he wasn't comfortable being like the de facto leader.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't like being in that role.
Yeah, he says that in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so everybody think, you know, oh, Paul's bossy. He wants to be bossy. We know here that he wasn't comfortable. He didn't want that. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be like having to fall on me all the time, you know.
It's also interesting, that conversation that John and Paul had in the cafeteria. You know, where Paul said to John that you're the leader, and John said, "Well, not always."
And he says, "Yes, always."
That's my favorite part.
But doesn't Paul come back and say something like, "Yes, always"? Like he kind of like is trying to you know. I thought that's how I remember it.
Yeah, because you figure they're still looking to John as the big brother, you know, because they're still thinking back to the Quarryman days of meeting him, and I mean that's how George. I mean, even with like all those years ago with the song, he was still thinking about that relationship, and that's I think deep down, even though Paul knew that he was the creative guy in those last 4 or 5 years driving that ship, that John in the back of his mind was always supposed to be number one. That's how they met it, you know. Just a takeaway from my perspective. So
I don't want to say something that's going to lead into an entirely different conversation there. But, one of the things I've brought up, I think on things we said today on the podcast show is that if you were really to break it down between 1962 to 66 and 67 to 70, I think John was far more dominant in the first 4 years. And then the last 4 years, Paul had a slight edge over John. But, if you really broke it down song by song, it's a little more balanced than people realize. It's just that, Paul got more of the hits. Paul got more of the A side. So people tend to think that, he was the dominant one. And yes, the idea for the Sgt. Pepper album was his, Magical Mystery Tour, the idea was his, but I'm only talking about the songs. I mean, you look at the White Album and between John songs and Paul songs, and it's very even for the most part. I think there's this, it's not a totally accurate picture to say that, Paul led the way, after Brian Epstein died, because, John still wrote so much material. I'm only talking about the songs here.
I think
I'm not
Paul
talking
was
about
more.
the direction. Yeah.
I think Paul was more intense about his songs. Like he would make them do Maxwell Silver's Hammer 132 times. Where John would be, okay, that's good enough.
But I don't think at the Get Back time, John looked like he really didn't have anything. He wasn't that interested or motivated to write. Remember, Paul, that's that scene where
he
he's
was
saying,
pushing John late.
He's saying, well,
"Do you
Jeff, you
have
come up with anything? Something like that. What do you. And I love that. And John's like, as much as I like John, I'm a John fan. I mean, he really, at times, he's just
lazy.
Yeah, he's lazy, and he just and probably on something, heroin at times and stuff. He just wasn't into it as much, and it shows in that film. And they have to drag out the prior recording of Across the Universe.
Yeah.
To work on that as a new version.
But still, I think there was that moment there where Paul was saying how many songs he wrote, and then he asked John how many he wrote, and he said none. I think. But that's not entirely true, because at that point he had written Don't Let Me Down, and he was in the process of writing Dig a Pony.
He's trying a few things, and Madman, which is Mr. Mustard. He was
a lot of people think that it's similar.
Well, he starts with that, and then he kind of works it in a little bit. Like, it's got the same same sound, maybe.
Right.
And then Give Me Some Truth he had.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, it's like Give Me Some Truth. You hear Paul, like, really, it's very much Paul, too.
Yeah.
I'm initially working on that.
That was actually really interesting seeing Paul sing Give Me Some Truth. When I first saw that, I was amazed. I'd never seen that before.
And all the input Paul's putting into Don't Let Me Down as well. As a John fan, I was like, oh, wow. Even Paul wrote half. When is he going to, say, hey, I wrote some of Don't Let Me Down.
Yeah.
I wonder who made the decision to leave Don't Let Me Down off of the album.
Because they needed the single. Maybe that's why. They put Get Back out.
The B-side, right? It was
the B-side. Maybe because they put Get Back out at first as a single.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how many voices were throwing out ideas and songs. I mean, Mal Evans was throwing ideas. Michael Lindsay Hall.
Yeah.
It's insane how many.
Well, I hope when Ken Womack does his book, I hope it's explained how Mal Evans, because I do remember hearing an audio interview with him before he passed, where he said that he wrote 50-50, Fixing a Hole, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Wow.
Really?
But back, and he said, but Paul, he said, Mal, he says, Lennon McCartney's so big. He said, you'll get your royalties and everything, but you mind? He goes, he says, I don't care. He says, I love them too much. Could you imagine?
He's a cool guy.
Could you imagine being friends with the Beatles? I remember him saying this. I can't wait to hear that audio clip sometime. Traveling the world with him, there's a 100-mile line of people who would take my place. So I didn't care. I loved them too much.
Yeah.
That's going to be the next great Beatles thing to come out, is Mel Evans' diary.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's going to be the only guy in the inner circle where we're actually hearing, because they've all just, been so respectful, right?
Man, it's too bad we lost him. It really, nice to hear his stories and things.
Imagine Neil Aspinall imagine the book he could have written.
Oh, Brody.
I know. Yeah. And it is fascinating to watch Get Back and to see just how McCartney's brain was working and how it was just
He was
on
always on.
He
Amazing.
was on overload there. I mean, it wasn't just the new songs he was creating. He was, he brought back "Woman," the song that he wrote for
Yeah.
Peter and Gordon there, and he had all these new ideas for other songs that he didn't finish. And it's like, how can any mind be that creative? I would hate to think that every album was like that.
It's a gift. It's a gift. I mean, a backseat of my car.
Yep.
Another day. Yeah.
You even see it in Get Back. I mean, there's one part. It's actually one of my favorite parts where Paul's just sitting there and he literally just out of thin air just makes up Get Back on the spot.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
that is a highlight for me.
That's one of the highlights.
If somebody says, like, out of those several hours, what's your highlight? That's right up there.
Me
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Another favorite of mine is when John, Paul, and Ringo hug. That was really nice to see, and also in the original Let It Be, Paul and George's argument, and then I thought they had their argument and George took off, and then we realized with this that totally different.
Right, Larry.
And Paul didn't do anything wrong, right? He was
no. Well, I always took Paul's side on the thing about, well, like, if I don't want to hear it played that way on Hey Jude, don't play it that way. I think he's right. It's his song. But it's interesting because in Let It Be, it really looks like, George is being like tough and all this, but he's actually in Get Back when you see the whole thing and a lot of them talking, he's actually trying to work with them, and he's actually kind of, okay, let's get this, let's work on this, let's do it. He's very, very compromising, George.
And they were fine after, a few minutes later. They were okay.
It's amazing. You can edit things in certain ways and just give a whole different impression for years, decades.
Yeah.
It would have been amazing if there would have been some sort of similar to the cafeteria scene of recordings when they went to George's house to bring him back.
That
would have been a grail.
But it was a mistake the first time they went to George's house for Yoko to be talking, right?
Apparently she was doing all the talking, but because John, I mean, he really was just, besides I guess the heroin thing, he just wasn't as into it. He was more, I guess,
he was fully into Yoko,
yeah. But then later, I mean, at least to his credit, at least when they get into the new studio, John starts coming to life and starts
he was
being more involved.
Yeah.
But it's actually kind of funny because there was a part where Linda was making a suggestion about something they should do for the show, and Paul just kind of takes a little jab at Yoko. He's like, "Hey, stay out of this, Yoko."
Yeah. And believe me, and you see now again. Anyway, I get too much with the talking dirt here, but I will. When you get Paul goes to take the phone call or whatever, then all of a sudden Linda's like able to talk. She leans forward, and whatever. I don't think that whatever she says. We're watching A Hard Day's Night and Help last night, and now she's doing all the talking. I really think Paul didn't let her talk that much. I think.
Yeah.
But
no matter what, I think John and Yoko were a team, and John respected Yoko's opinion, and he wanted her opinion there.
Yeah, I want my girlfriend's opinion on things. Definitely.
Of course.
She represented him at that moment, and if he didn't feel like talking, then it was fine with him.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't blame Yoko for that. So.
No.
Yeah.
And to be fair, to throw it against Paul, I mean, I would have been annoyed as the other guys having, somebody's child running around,
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah, right. Yeah.
A kid screaming or doing whatever, complaining that they're hungry off camera. That could be just as bad.
That was funny when Heather was singing like Yoko.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a good moment.
This part where Heather's playing drums at Ringo.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they included the so-called Yoko jam, and the fact that you see Paul trying to get the feedback. Mm-hmm. I've seen these clips before. They were in some other thing, but I think Yoko then and now and then, whatever. Anyway, and you see him like they're actually, and Ringo's going mad on the drums and everything. It's like they're
just having fun.
They're having fun with it, but.
You know, that's one thing about this documentary. It's a shame that we're watching this knowing what was going to happen, that
Yeah.
they were going to break up. And if you were a fly on the wall and you observed all this in January of '69, would you honestly be thinking this was a band that was going to break up, despite the fact that George quit and came back?
Not that
I still
quickly.
get the feeling it was inevitable. It was going to happen. I
Mhm.
did.
Oh, for
I mean,
reasons that we know now, yes. But if you were watching
um,
this at that time, I don't think you'd be thinking this is a normal band having problems and working through
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
well, some of those conversations about in the first part where they're sitting around and talking about, well, maybe should be the end then, or whatever,
Yeah.
divorce or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I think kind of in the back of their mind they knew, because there's actually a part where Paul was saying one of his ideas where they have news clips between each
Ah,
song, and he
Yeah.
said, the last news clip, the biggest one will be the Beatles have broken up.
Yep.
yeah. I think
Mm.
they kind of knew it was going to come. I think.
But it's too
And
bad it had to be like a divorce. I mean, it could have just went, let's just go our separate ways for a year, come back or something.
Right.
There was no, there was just like we gotta kill this thing.
Hmm.
Unfortunately.
I don't know if we'll ever know the real answer to that, because Ringo said many times when they were doing the Abbey Road album, we didn't go into it thinking this is the
Yeah.
last album, this is the last song.
Hmm.
You know, and then we know now, well, not now, we knew about it when the book One Day at a Time came out, about that meeting that they had
Yep.
September 15th, where John proposed making another album with
Hmm.
John, Paul, and George equally getting 4 songs, and
Hmm.
Ringo getting 2.
Wow.
And then after Live Peace in Toronto, everything changed.
Yeah.
and yet they
So,
put the end so poetically at the
Yeah.
end of the album.
yeah.
I don't know.
And then this is also years later. I don't know how true it is, but I can't remember where it was I read it. There was a play called Beatlemania, and supposedly John wrote. There was a lawsuit against the people who were doing the play, and John supposedly wrote in it, "I and the 3 other Beatles have plans to stage a reunion." Um, I don't know how true it is. I've read
No.
it somewhere.
I
Maybe
don't
that
know.
was to help him win the case, to give him more,
Yeah,
more
that's
power.
yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Well, you also know that when Paul signed with Columbia in '79 or so, in his contract, it stipulated that he would be allowed to reunite with the Beatles if the
Mm.
situation was to
It was
arise.
good to have it open. You
Oh, that's
know,
interesting. Hadn't heard that before. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, I'm still one of those people that's glad the way it turned out in retrospect, because they wound up stopping on top and they never had
Yeah.
a real bomb or anything.
Hmm.
And I just think if they had kept on, I keep thinking ultimately they would have had to have a Turkey album or
Yeah.
one that wasn't really that good. It's hard to
Yeah.
imagine though with the talent in there, especially in John, Paul, and George as writers at that
Hmm.
time, having an album that was like lousy. But you
Well,
never know. You never know.
we would have got the songs they did on solo albums as Beatles songs if they were still together. They just would have done them as a foursome rather
Yeah.
than
That's
probably the same songs.
Some
Yeah.
maybe, but
that's
not some
no,
not.
You don't think
I
so?
mean,
no.
I think there's a lot of Wing songs that could have easily been Beatles songs. Uncle
Well, like you
Albert.
can't
It's
have maybe I'm amazed. Maybe I'm amazed was about the fact that Paul was lost right after
Yeah.
Hmm.
broke it up. And my sweet Lord, I wonder if John and Paul would have allowed that on an album, but maybe
Hmm.
I
I
wonder.
think John and Paul would probably not been comfortable doing most of the stuff from All Things Must Pass.
Hmm.
And I also think that Paul and George probably wouldn't have wanted to play the stuff that was on Plastic Ono Band.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not gonna have God, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
No.
yeah.
I don't believe in
Yeah.
Beatles.
Yeah.
But I've been saying ever since I started my show that the Beatles went on to have the most successful solo careers of all time. And that's something that we should be embracing.
Hmm.
Not that they broke up. They broke up while they were on top, and that also makes it more, alluring
Yeah.
to want them back. You're always going to have that image of them when they were together, and they'll always be frozen in time. They'll always be young guys, putting out this
They're
tremendous
the only
movie.
band for me that had a completely consistent, great career discography. Even Led Zeppelin, right? Their last couple albums, they weren't as good as the earlier albums. The Rolling Stones, they released some
Sure.
mediocre albums. The Beatles,
Yeah.
Beatles
it's
didn't have
imagine-
mediocre.
yeah.
But you
Yeah.
name any other band out there where every member had hit records
Yeah.
and big selling albums,
Yeah.
and you won't find them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, it's I mean, you've got bands like Fleetwood Mac, where Lindsey Buckingham had some success on his own. Stevie Nicks certainly had a lot. Christy McVie had a little, but the other members didn't have success.
Mhm.
The Eagles, you know, Glenn Fry and Don Henley.
Now,
You
I'm,
really
st- I'm
can't
still
count, you know, Joe
just to
Walsh
play
and all that.
devil's advocate, which I do so well. I would even say I still believe that, especially in the earlier solo days, people were interested because it was an ex-Beatle.
Mhm.
You know, people bought. I really believe that. Like, I think people bought Wildlife because it was Paul McCartney
Mhm.
of the Beatles, former Beatle. You know, I don't know if Wildlife had come out later. I don't know when, 1980 or something. If it would have been as done as well as it had then. But overall, as Ken says, the music's there. Overall, there's good music there. It's not
Well,
just about the Beatle, ex-Beatle, but
Right.
it
let me
helped.
just respond to that because we've had this debate here on Talk More Talk, and there's definitely some truth to that. Certainly, a lot of people that bought the solo music were Beatle fans. You know, the sales are also based upon your track record of what you've done before,
Mhm.
and just like the later Beatles albums sold because of what the Beatles did before that, this is a continuation of that. But having my radio background and knowing that when you're dealing with hit records and you're on top 40 radio and you've got little kids listening to this music up through people in their 20s and 30s, a lot of the kids bought these singles not knowing that they were Beatles.
Mhm.
Obviously, there were some that did, but some of the audience that the Beatles attracted on their own were brand new fans altogether.
Yeah.
And that certainly carried over later on when George Harrison had Cloud Nine. There were a lot of young fans that didn't know he was a Beatle. You know, when the Traveling Wilburys came out, a
Yeah.
lot of people may not have known George Harrison's history before the Traveling
Or
Wilburys.
Bob
I know it
Dylan.
sounds crazy,
No,
but
yeah, but don't be surprised. Some people
yeah,
today don't know.
I
you
think kind of to go
know,
off a little what you were saying, Ken, was the only band I can think of that every member had a good amount of success after after they broke up. The only one I can think of really is Cream.
well, definitely Eric Clapton, but
Right.
I'm talking about having hit songs
Oh yeah.
and high charting albums. Did Jack Bruce have any?
Well, I mean, they had
I don't.
Blind Faith after that, but that was really only one album.
Right, but I'm talking about as an
Mhm.
individual, as a
Right.
solo artist on their own.
Right.
Even, Ringo had 7 top 10 singles in the
He
United
came out
States and
strong.
2
He
number
really,
Yeah.
he,
ones.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and yeah, I think it's really remarkable. And I'm not dissing the other bands. I think Genesis definitely, if you count
Oh yeah.
Phil Collins, and if you want to go back to Peter Gabriel, and then Mike Rutherford with Mike and the Mechanics, you can
Yeah.
say that. But there's a lot of members of Genesis through the years that didn't have
Yeah.
chart success. It's more of a loyal cult following. But the Beatles are the only band you can say that about. So,
Yeah.
in a way, the Beatle breakup created a rebirth, the second life of the four of them on their own. And there's never been any band to be able to have that much success on their own. And I think that's something that we should be thrilled about. And
I
like I
am.
Absolutely.
said, embracing.
Yeah.
So,
That's what
you
John
know,
Lennon said in that interview
yep,
with Yoko. He said, think of all the great music you've gotten with everybody
right.
Right.
else.
Yeah.
So look at it that way.
Yeah. So how's everybody doing for time? Are we? Let me know here.
I've got
I'm good.
about 10 minutes, 10
10 minutes?
minutes.
You good for 10
Me
more,
too.
Ken? Okay.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
Is there
Glenn,
any?
are you ready to go or?
I'm good, man. I can talk I can talk about the Beatles for another
I'm having a
24
great time. Too bad I
Yeah,
gotta
this is fun.
do something in
What
20
about
minutes.
part 2 of Lewison's book? Is anybody hearing anything?
He's not giving any definite dates.
I love Mark Lewison's work. I really do. I really do. I'm not just saying that to blow smoke or anything, but I'm like, why are you doing all these other things? He's doing all these other
Can we just
projects and things.
Because
get
he needs
volume
the
3
money.
going?
Oh
That's
well,
why
Yeah.
he's doing it.
you know,
You know.
yeah. But I guess that's goes without saying, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I always said I think at this point it's been so long now. Why not wait until if he's going to at the earliest 2024, because that's going to be the big 60th anniversary, 64 Beatles in America and all that, and that will be in the second book. So at this point, well, it's 2023 now, so it's not happening this
Yeah,
year.
well, you're probably right anyway in the timing, at least. If
You
if
know,
it
I
comes out
mean,
that date.
but
Yeah.
I was listening to what gave. I forget where he gave this interview. But he gave a really good interview, just a new one, brand new one, last month. And of course, he was talking about that again, and he's kind of said, "Yeah, I gotta get to work on the book." He was joking. I gotta move with that. But yeah, I don't know.
You know, I just want to say that I think that with Mark, the most important thing for him to do is to get as much information as he can. And I know that he wants to do interviews, and there are fewer and fewer people left from that time period of the 60s that are
Yeah.
still alive. And so he has to capture whatever he can now. And I have a feeling that when the second volume comes out, let's just say it goes up through the end of 66. It'd be good if it led right up to like before Sergeant Pepper or something like that. But I think that there won't be as long a wait for Volume 3 because he'll have done all that other research and all the interviews that he needs. He's got to get whatever people are still alive to talk now before it's too late.
Yeah.
So, and I hate to sound, you know, depressing
No.
about it, but it's just reality. There are fewer and fewer people from that time period who can talk
Right.
now, and I know that he prides himself in getting
Yeah.
documentation and interviews from that time period, which he'll use as well. But I just think that the wait won't be as long for the third volume after the
Has
second one comes out.
Have you ever interviewed Mark Lewison,
A few
Ken?
times. A few
Yeah?
times. I
Excellent.
interviewed him right when Tune In came out,
Okay.
and it's one of my favorite interviews ever because
Oh,
Tune In was such a revelation.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just the story about how the Beatles really got their contract, and it's so incredible that I can't believe that didn't make front page news
Yeah,
around the
and
world.
that I was going to say that hasn't become permanent history yet. Like, not part of it. It's nobody's really out there in the general public, or whatever we call it, paying attention to it. We know the diehards know from reading the book, but that's not replaced yet. The folklore, it hasn't replaced it, which it
But
should if that's the case.
you know what's the most remarkable thing about it all? Is that it's probably very likely that the Beatles themselves never knew about
Right, he
this.
said that. He said that in this last
Yeah.
interview, right? Yeah, he said they probably
So
never knew themselves, and Kim Bennett was like so happy to be interviewed by him, and finally got a chance to let this all out. For years, he wanted to say this, that it was because of him, really. That, and I'm still a little like the details. I get a little mixed up. They wanted the publishing for
for Like Dreamers Do.
Like Dreamers Do. So in a way, the Decca tapes, even though they were all the Decca tapes, they were a failure and they got turned down. It was an original by Paul. Paul wrote it, really, Paul.
Yep, it's really Paul's
It
song.
is why the Beatles got signed in a way, and they kind of forced George Martin to sign them,
Right.
and he never wanted to tell that story.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe he forgot that. It's very possible.
I wonder. And there's the other thing too about Ringo. I mean, again, I love George Martin. I call him the official fifth Beatle. I mean, I love the Beatles owe so much to George Martin. But the thing is too, I wonder the whole thing with Ringo. He had already heard Ringo. I heard and didn't like him right before. He always tells the story about, oh, well, I don't even know who you are, so I that's why I had Andy White here. I don't know who you are,
Yeah.
so I hired Andy White, but he already heard Ringo, I believe.
Okay. And then there's one other thing. Why on earth If the publishing company Ardmore and Beechwood wanted Like Dreamers Do,
Why they never recorded?
why didn't they do it?
That's why. That's why the story makes you pause a little.
Right.
How did everything change? It's a son.
You never did it
Yeah.
after all that.
There's so
Hey,
many
Brian,
twists
I
and
have a
turns,
question for you because
Sure.
I believe you're a little younger than I am.
Okay. I think so. Yeah.
What is your age?
I'm 34.
34. So
Oh, you're just
how
a year
did you?
younger than Larry.
Yeah. Wow, you're younger than me. So how did you get into the Beatles? I'm curious.
The very first time I ever heard them, I was about 6 years old. I remember this like it happened yesterday. I was in my aunt's car. She had a cassette player and she played Revolution. And the intro, just that guitar
Yeah.
intro and the scream
That's
Paul
great.
has,
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, what is this? And I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what the song was. So every time I saw her, I would just say, can you play that scream song? I didn't know what it was called. And it just progressed from there. My dad, he gave me cassettes that he had.
Yeah.
And it's just grown and grown to the point where I now have them tattooed on me.
Wow.
Oh, you're addicted to
Look
the
at
Beatles.
that.
Yes.
Has anyone
That's
here ever
good.
heard Pee Wee Creighton's "Do Unto Others"?
Yes, didn't Ken Womack bring that out in his book on John?
Somebody told me once, and
Yeah.
YouTube's here. Play the song "Do try to remember it. "Do Unto Others" by it's not an easy name to remember. Pee Wee Creighton, and you'll hear the beginning. That's where John got it from. I hate to say.
Yeah.
John nicked
I
a
didn't
lot
know.
of things, but he admits. I never heard him admit that one, but he
Yeah.
admits a lot of things.
Yeah.
When he talked to Dennis Elsis in '74. And by the way, no, we're not going to talk about Stu Ball. Don't worry, Ken.
Please don't.
Although it's the same melody. We
It's
disagree
not.
on this.
It's
all the
not.
time.
It's not.
Oh,
That broke my heart when I heard Stu Ball. I'm like, you're kidding me. This is a Happy Christmas.
Really? I didn't even think about that.
It's similar. It's not a complete ripoff.
No, not exact. No, not exact.
Well, you come from the old folk music days,
Had a
right?
race
borrow. Everybody
horse.
borrowed in the folk music
Yeah.
thing. So
And
it's just
he
on the rock.
was real good.
Well, even the whole thing with like My Sweet Lord, the same thing.
He never drank. Oh wow, that's crazy. Two old racehorse. So this is Christmas. I never thought about that before.
I ruined.
Crazy.
It's breaking my heart because
all night.
I'm a John guy, and it's like, wow. And you don't hear, now this is the competition thing again, friendly competition. The thing is that you don't hear that many Paul songs that sound like something. I know the song anyway.
Well, Paul's a melody monster.
Right away when I heard that, it was
Yeah.
People Get Ready, right?
That's what I thought. But it's only the beginning, right?
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Yeah.
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 And actually, Tiny Bubble.
Yeah.
The chorus sounds like Piggies.
Really?
Something that talking about songs that sound alike. I've always said the song that John has on Plastic Ono Band, "Look at Me." The guitar in that is Julia, pretty much.
Yeah, somebody told me
style.
that. Yeah.
That's the
And
style that he picked that up from Donovan.
And I always loved Sun King, my whole life, and then I'm hearing it's again. What is it called again?
It's
Fleetwood
Albatross?
Mac. Albatross.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, it's inspired.
Yeah, it has that dreamy, ethereal feel to it. That's
And
where
there's
they got
nothing.
it from.
There's nothing wrong. I mean, people take inspiration from each other.
Yeah.
And I remember some quote from it might have been the song "Fame" that Bowie and Lennon did, where John had a quote or something, and he said, "We did some Stevie Wonder middle eight backwards," or something. It might have been for that song, and it's like, it's amazing, And I always wonder about just like starting over. People point out too, but when I see you, darling, that part. Is that a little bit Dory babyish? I don't know.
Actually, in a Heartbeat from Ringo, "From Time Takes Time" is it's very Beach Boys-ish, and yes, Brian Wilson's on it, but it kind of reminds me of "Don't Worry, Baby." So,
yeah, there's only so many chords out there, right? They say.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that was a lot of fun. We should do this again.
Yeah.
We
How about tomorrow night?
Yeah, tomorrow night. Hey, Joe, if you want, you can join me if you want to talk to this guy.
Oh well, I don't have the book yet. I know you only read
That
5%.
doesn't matter. I don't know. I haven't read much of it either.
Well,
Talk about
I-
Paul McCartney.
I'd like to get the book
Yeah.
at some point, and we're probably going to do it also on Talk More Talk. You know,
Yeah.
Probably. And I'm going to
And-
do it on my channel too.
And I was thinking about this. I'm like, I did a couple of interviews with Laurie Kay and Madeline Baccaro and things.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, I hope Larry doesn't think if I ever get this guy on the show that I'm copying him, because people,
No.
you
That's
know,
silly.
a
No.
Beatle product is out. People
Yeah.
interview them.
Get whoever you can. Yeah.
I gotta beef up the on my channel. I gotta get more into the interviews.
Just don't
I
interview
do it.
Mark Farner.
Oh no, that's okay. I'll leave that one for you. You did it. You did it already.
So thanks everybody.
Thank
a lot
you.
of fun. We'll do it
This is
again.
awesome,
sometime.
guys.
great,
It's a
sure.
pleasure being on with you guys.
Yeah,
Stay in
remember
touch.
to-
Stay in touch.
Remember to check out everybody's channel and Ken's radio show, and I'll have all the links below the video. And
Peace and love. Peace and love.
yeah, thanks
Hey,
Brian, thanks Sam, thanks
Thank
Joe,
you.
thanks
you.
Ken, and
Thank
what's your
you.
name? Glenn. Thank you, Glenn.
All right, everybody. Great time.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.